Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Easy English Spark channel. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Just like how Liam in our story is stepping into a new journey, today we're going to take steps toward enhancing your English listening and speaking skills, one conversation at a time. Whether you're just starting or looking to improve, just like Liam's new job in a sports shop, we'll help you find the perfect fit to build your confidence and speak more fluently. So, let's get started and make your English journey feel like home. Chapter 1: A Young Man's Struggle. Liam Green was just like many other young men his age, full of hopes and dreams, yet facing the harsh reality of life. He had recently graduated from college and was eager to start a career, but things weren't as easy as he had imagined. The job market was tough, and no matter how many applications he filled out or how many interviews he attended, he kept hitting dead ends. Every morning he would wake up early, check the job listings online, and apply to every position that seemed even remotely related to his skills. He would craft the perfect cover letter, tweaking it to match each specific job description, but every time he received the same response: nothing. It was as though the world was telling him he wasn't enough, and it made him feel like he was stuck in a never-ending cycle of rejection. Liam wasn't someone who gave up easily. He had always been a determined person, the kind who would go after what he wanted no matter the challenges. But this time, it felt different. It felt personal. His self-esteem was starting to take a hit, and the rejection letters seemed to pile up faster than his hope. Liam lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in the city. It wasn't much, but it was his place, and he had hoped it would be the starting point for a bigger future. The apartment was a modest, slightly run-down building with thin walls and creaky floors. The windows barely kept out the cold during the winter, and the heating barely worked. But it was home. Every day after applying for jobs, Liam would sit in his kitchen, staring out of the window, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. What troubled him the most was how quickly his savings were dwindling. He wasn't the type to live lavishly, but basic things like groceries and utilities were starting to feel like luxuries he couldn't afford. He couldn't even remember the last time he went out to eat or bought something as simple as a new shirt. His clothes were starting to look worn out, and the thought of attending another interview in his only pair of dress shoes made him cringe. They were scuffed. The sole was starting to peel away, and he knew they wouldn't make the right impression. He had dreams like anyone else. Liam had always imagined himself working in a job that he loved, something that made him feel fulfilled and successful. But every time he looked at his bank balance or his list of rejected applications, those dreams seemed further and further out of reach. It wasn't just the lack of money that was discouraging him. It was the feeling that, despite all his efforts, he wasn't good enough. His friends, too, had started moving forward in their careers, and that only made him feel more isolated. They were buying cars, getting promotions, and living in nicer apartments. And there he was, still trying to figure out how to pay rent on time. It wasn't always like this. When Liam was younger, he had a different vision for his future. He had always been an active person, involved in sports from a very young age. Football was his passion, and tennis followed closely behind. He had always been competitive, pushing himself to be the best, and for a time, he was. He imagined himself playing football professionally, making it onto a big team, earning a great salary, and living the dream. He even had the skill. He could move fast, had an excellent shot, and was great at reading the game. But as time went on, other better players came into the scene. He could see it in the papers, on TV. Players younger than him, with more experience, more opportunities, and bigger sponsorships. And his dream, once so bright and clear, started to fade. The truth was, he was good at sports, but he was never good enough to go pro. His chances were slipping away, and with each passing day, he found himself drifting further away from his childhood dreams. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the reality. He had to face it. So now, here he was, struggling to find any job that would give him a sense of stability. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. The problem was, everything seemed out of his reach. Each job he applied for seemed to require more experience than he had, or the positions were already filled by people who seemed far more qualified than him. He felt as though every door was locked and he couldn't find the key. But in the midst of all this, Liam remained determined. He didn't want to give up. There had to be a way forward. His situation might be tough, but he believed that if he kept trying, something would change. He had to believe that there was more to his life than just rejection letters and empty promises. Somewhere, out there, was a job that he could do, something that would help him regain his confidence, pay the bills, and maybe, just maybe, lead to something more. As the days dragged on, Liam's hope began to flicker like a dying candle. But the thing about hope is, it's always there, even when you least expect it. He just had to keep looking, keep applying, and keep his faith alive, no matter how many setbacks came his way. Little did he know that a simple thought, an idea that would come to him one afternoon, would set him on a new path. A path that would change everything. Chapter 2. Forgotten Dreams. As Liam sat alone in his small apartment, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He had been so caught up in his daily struggles that he had almost forgotten the dreams he once held so dearly. Dreams that seemed so vivid and attainable when he was younger. Dreams that no longer felt within his reach. Liam's childhood was filled with energy and excitement. From a young age, he had always been the kid who loved to play sports. His parents often joked that he couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes without getting the urge to run outside, kick a ball, or pick up a tennis racket. He had an innate talent for sports. His speed, agility, and determination set him apart from the other kids. Whether it was football, tennis, or even basketball, Liam excelled. He had a passion for competition, for pushing himself to be the best. But there was one sport that he truly loved above all others: football. He remembered the thrill of kicking a ball down the field, the feeling of the crowd cheering, and the excitement of scoring goals. As a child, he dreamed of playing for a professional football team. He imagined himself in the spotlight, with thousands of fans chanting his name, earning a living doing something he truly loved. It wasn't just a dream for him. It was a vision, a future that he could almost touch. Liam's parents were supportive of his dreams. They would drive him to practices and matches, cheering him on from the sidelines. His coaches saw potential in him too. "Liam, you've got what it takes to make it to the top," they'd tell him. Those words stayed with him for years, fueling his belief that he could turn his passion into a career. His friends, too, were all on the same page. They were a tight-knit group, always practicing together, always competing, and always believing that one of them would make it big. But as time passed, the reality of sports began to set in. Liam wasn't the only talented player on the field. In fact, as he grew older, he realized that he wasn't the best anymore. New players entered the scene, players who were faster, stronger, and more skilled. Some had been playing professionally since they were children, their entire lives devoted to the sport. They had better coaching, better resources, and better connections. They seemed to have the edge that Liam didn't. The turning point came when he was in his late teens. He was playing in a regional football tournament, and there was a scout from a professional team in the crowd. The game was intense, and Liam played his heart out. He scored a goal, made several key passes, and even got a few assists. But despite his performance, the scout didn't approach him. Instead, he walked right past him and approached another player, someone who was faster, someone who had been on the radar for much longer. That moment, that one small interaction, crushed Liam's dream. He realized that no matter how much he loved the game or how hard he worked, there were other players who had a better chance at success. The reality of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't going to make it as a professional footballer. He didn't have the right connections, the right opportunities, or the right resources. And worse, he didn't even have the same level of passion anymore. It wasn't just the defeat that bothered him. It was the loss of something that had once meant so much. Over time, Liam's love for football began to fade. He still enjoyed playing it in his spare time, but it was no longer his focus. He started playing tennis more, and even that didn't feel the same. The fire that once burned so brightly inside him was now just a flicker. He felt lost. Without the dream of becoming a professional athlete, he didn't know what his future looked like. He had no plan, no direction. His life felt aimless, like a ship drifting on an endless sea with no destination. It wasn't just sports that he had to let go of. Liam had spent years of his youth focusing on his athleticism, on improving his skills, that he had never really thought about other aspects of his life. Now, as an adult, he realized that he had little experience with anything else. His education was decent, but nothing extraordinary. His job prospects were slim, and his experience in the workforce was limited. He had spent so much time pursuing a dream that he had neglected to build a foundation for the rest of his life. Liam tried to stay optimistic. He tried to remind himself that his story wasn't over, that he still had time to figure things out. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that his best years were behind him. It was hard to look around and see so many of his friends moving forward in their careers, living the lives they had always imagined, while he felt stuck in place. One evening, as Liam sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone, he thought about his past, about the young boy who once dreamed of becoming a football star. That boy was full of hope, full of confidence, full of belief that anything was possible. But where had that boy gone? He realized that he had buried his dreams deep inside, convinced that they would never come true. And in doing so, he had allowed himself to forget who he really was. It was in that moment, sitting alone with his thoughts, that Liam decided something. He wasn't going to let those dreams die completely. They might have faded over time, but they still existed inside him somewhere. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but he would find a way to rediscover his passion for life. It wouldn't be through sports, and it might not be through a career as glamorous as he once imagined, but he knew he had to do something, anything, to reignite that spark, to remind himself that his life was still full of potential. And so, with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose, Liam made a vow to himself. He would not let his forgotten dreams remain forgotten. He would find a new way to move forward, no matter how difficult it might be. Chapter 3: A New Hope. It had been weeks since Liam made the decision to move forward with his life. Despite all the struggles, he had begun to slowly accept the reality of his situation. His football dreams, once so vivid and full of promise, were now behind him, but he was ready to create a new path. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of his past still lingered, and he felt the sting of his unfulfilled dreams. but he was learning to let go and embrace the idea that his future wasn't dictated by what he had lost. It was defined by what he could still achieve. One chilly morning, Liam found himself pacing in his tiny living room, trying to figure out what to do next. He had already applied for a few more jobs, but each one had turned out to be just like the rest. No response, no offers, and certainly no breakthrough. The uncertainty was starting to wear on him. He felt like he was running out of options. He had spent so many hours on job boards, reading about various positions that he thought might suit him. But nothing seemed quite right. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do anymore, but he knew one thing for certain. He didn't want to keep feeling like this. Stuck. Trapped. Waiting for something that might never come. That's when the thought struck him. It came quietly, almost like a whisper, as he sat down at his worn-out kitchen table, staring at a mug of coffee. His fingers absent-mindedly tapped the rim of the cup, his mind wandering. What if, he mused aloud, I could work in a sports shop? At first, Liam dismissed the idea. It seemed too simple, too much like a fallback plan, and yet something about it felt right. He had always been surrounded by sports, whether playing football or tennis, and though his career as an athlete was over, his love for sports never went away. Working in a sports store would allow him to be around the things he enjoyed, without the pressure of competing at the professional level. He could still be part of the world he loved, but in a different way. He didn't have much experience working in retail, but it didn't seem like an impossible job to learn. Plus, it was something he could do right now. There were no major barriers. No expensive education or years of experience required. He could start from the ground up. Maybe it wasn't the big break he had once dreamed of, but it was a step forward. A way to keep moving, even if it was just a small step. The more he thought about it, the more Liam liked the idea. He could take his passion for sports, his knowledge of equipment, and his understanding of what athletes, amateur or professional, needed, and apply that in a new way. He could still interact with the things he loved, whether it was helping customers pick out the right football boots or explaining the best tennis rackets to use for a beginner. He could be a part of the sports community without being the one in the spotlight. His heart started to lift a little at the thought. For the first time in a while, he felt a glimmer of excitement. Perhaps this was the direction he had been searching for. With newfound purpose, Liam immediately jumped on his laptop and started looking for sports stores in his area that were hiring. He couldn't waste any more time. This might be his chance to get out of his rut. As he scrolled through the listings, his eyes fell on a small ad for a sports shop in a neighboring town. They were looking for staff, and they seemed to value passion for sports over specific experience. Perfect, Liam whispered, a smile creeping up on his face. This was his opportunity. He quickly prepared his resume, adding details of his time spent playing sports, his knowledge of various games, and his commitment to helping others enjoy sports as much as he did. While he didn't have formal retail experience, he felt his passion and enthusiasm for the subject would make up for it. After all, he was not just applying for a job, he was applying for something he genuinely cared about. Liam sent off the email with his application and then waited. He tried to keep himself busy, but the anticipation gnawed at him. He'd been waiting for a breakthrough for so long, and though this job wasn't what he once envisioned for himself, it felt like the right fit. The next day, Liam received a response. The subject line was simple: sports shop staff position, interview invitation. His heart skipped a beat. He opened the email and read through the details. The manager wanted to meet him the following week for an interview. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a chance. It was the first positive sign he had received in weeks, and it gave him hope. For the first time in months, Liam allowed himself to feel optimistic. The weight on his shoulders seemed lighter, and the burden of his past seemed less heavy. He wasn't going to let fear hold him back anymore. He wasn't going to let his past failures define him. This was a fresh start, a new beginning. In the bar. Days leading up to the interview, Liam felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. He researched the store, looked into the products they sold, and prepared himself for questions he might be asked. He practiced answers in the mirror, reminding himself that this wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing his passion and determination. On the morning of the interview, Liam got dressed in his best shirt and pants, even though he wasn't sure if they were exactly the right choice for a job in retail. But it didn't matter. He was finally doing something, and that was all that mattered. He had made the decision to move forward with his life, and no matter the outcome, he was proud of himself for taking that first step. He took a deep breath as he left his apartment and walked to the bus stop. The weather was crisp, and the city felt alive with possibilities. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt like he had a future. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't waiting for life to happen to him. He was actively making it happen. The interview was brief, but positive. The manager seemed impressed by Liam's passion for sports and his eagerness to learn. The job wasn't guaranteed, but it was clear that Liam had left a strong impression. As he walked back home that afternoon, Liam felt a renewed sense of hope. This was just the beginning of something new. A small step, but a meaningful one. A new hope was on the horizon, and he was ready to take it. Chapter 4. Desperate Measures. After Liam submitted his application for the sports shop position, the days seemed to drag on at an agonizing pace. Though he had allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope, the reality of his situation was that he couldn't afford to sit back and wait for things to happen. The rent was due, his savings were nearly gone, and the feeling of desperation was beginning to creep in again. He spent his days checking his email obsessively, hoping for a response. But each time he opened his inbox, he found only more rejection emails or silence. It was the same routine, day in and day out. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him, and as much as he tried to stay hopeful, the mounting pressure was starting to wear him thin. Liam had never been one to ask for help. He had always prided himself on his independence and his ability to take care of things on his own. But now, as he sat at his small kitchen table, a feeling of helplessness washed over him. He needed something, anything, to change. He had tried all the usual channels, and nothing seemed to be working. His hands trembled slightly as he closed his laptop, the realization sinking in that he could not keep going like this for much longer. It was the afternoon when he received the call. It wasn't from the sports shop. In fact, it wasn't even a job offer. It was from his landlord, asking about his rent payment. Liam could feel his stomach churn as he listened to the voice on the other end of the phone, the tone stern but polite. "Liam, you're 2 weeks late on your rent. I need the payment by the end of this week or we'll have to discuss other options." Liam swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had been avoiding the conversation for days, hoping that somehow he would find a solution before it came to this. But now that it was happening, the weight of his financial strain hit him harder than ever. He had no idea how he was going to come up with the money. "I'll get it to you," Liam said, his voice betraying his anxiety. "I just need a little more time." He hung up the phone and sat back, staring blankly at the wall. Time was running out. The rent had always been manageable in the past, but without a steady income, things had become difficult. He had no family to turn to for help. His friends were in similar situations, trying to make ends meet. He couldn't burden them with his problems. So, once again, he was left to figure it out on his own. The clock was ticking, and the pressure to act was mounting. In a panic, Liam did something he had never thought he would do. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had been avoiding for months. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate measure. The phone rang several times before it was picked up. "Liam? What's up?" came the voice of his old friend, Mark. Liam hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Mark, I need your help. I'm in a tight spot." Mark had always been a good friend, the kind of guy who would drop everything to help someone in need. But Liam hated asking for favors, especially when it came to money. They had both been struggling to find their footing after college, and asking for a loan now seemed like a sign of failure. But he had no other choice. "I need to borrow some money, just enough to cover my rent this month," I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Please, Mark. I don't know who else to ask. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Liam could hear Mark sighing, and his stomach twisted. He didn't want to put his friend in a difficult position, but it was either this or face eviction. All right, man, Mark finally said. I'll transfer some money to your account, but you've got to promise me you're going to get it. Together. You can't keep letting things get this bad. Liam felt a surge of relief, mixed with guilt. He thanked Mark repeatedly, promising to pay him back as soon as he could. But as he hung up the phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just taken a step backward. He didn't want to depend on anyone, least of all his friends. He wanted to stand on his own 2 feet. But right now, standing alone seemed impossible. And he couldn't afford to be proud when survival was at stake. With Mark's help, Liam managed to cover his rent for the month. But he knew it was just a temporary fix. The thought of relying on others for support made him feel small, as if he were admitting defeat. But sometimes, Liam reminded himself, you had to swallow your pride and do what was necessary to survive. Days passed, and Liam continued to wait for the email from the sports shop. He applied for a few other jobs, but nothing seemed promising. It was becoming harder and harder to ignore the voice in his head telling him that he was running out of time. Each passing day made him feel more desperate, as if the clock was ticking louder with every minute. One afternoon, as he was scrolling through job listings again, an idea sparked in his mind. It was a risky idea, but at this point, he was willing to try anything. He remembered a few contacts from his old football days, coaches, trainers, even a couple of local sports stores. He could try reaching out to them directly, asking if they needed extra hands, even if it was just part-time or temporary work. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a way to keep moving forward while he waited for something bigger to come through. Liam didn't have much to lose at this point. With a deep breath, he began drafting a series of emails, explaining his situation and offering his services. He wasn't asking for a favor, just an opportunity. He was willing to work for anything, whether it was running errands, assisting with inventory, or helping with customer service. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he typed the first email. Then another, and another. It felt strange to send out so many requests, but Liam knew he couldn't keep waiting. His desperation was now driving him to make the calls he should have made weeks ago. He needed to keep pushing forward, even if it meant taking the hardest steps of all. As he hit send on the last email, he felt a surge of determination. This was the moment he could no longer afford to wait. It was time to take control of his life again. No more waiting for emails, no more hoping things would just work out. He had to make them work out. Liam leaned back in his chair and exhaled. slowly. It wasn't much, but it was something. He had taken a step, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was back in the driver's seat. He didn't know if it would work, but he knew he had done everything he could. Now, all he could do was wait. Chapter 5. A Surprise Invitation. Liam's life had become a blur of uncertainty and routine. Each day seemed to blend into the next as he went through the motions of job hunting, keeping his apartment tidy, and trying to keep the sense of dread that had settled deep in his chest at bay. The weight of financial strain was always there, hovering over him like a dark cloud. His temporary fix of borrowing money from Mark helped for now, but it didn't change the fact that Liam was still stuck, waiting for a job that never seemed to materialize. The sports shop had yet to respond to his application, and Liam had spent days convincing himself that he was just another applicant, lost in a sea of hopefuls. The other places he had reached out to were either non-responsive or didn't need extra hands. His thoughts often wandered to the idea that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't meant to be. The more time passed, the more he began to doubt himself. The job he had hoped for was slipping further and further from his grasp. Perhaps it was all a dream, and he wasn't cut out for anything outside of football after all. Liam sat at his kitchen table one evening, staring at his phone. The silence was deafening. His screen was filled with messages, most of them from friends asking how he was doing. He hadn't responded in a while, not because he didn't appreciate their concern, but because he didn't know how to explain the mess his life had become. Instead, he had grown used to the quiet. He liked the stillness. It allowed him to think, even if those thoughts weren't always positive. He was about to close his phone when something caught his eye. An email notification blinked on the screen, and for a moment, Liam froze. He hadn't received a job offer or a reply in days. Could it be the sports shop? He immediately opened the email, his pulse quickening. The subject line read, "Interview, invitation, sports shop position." His heart skipped a beat. He clicked it open, not daring to believe what he was reading at first. The message was short and to the point, but it felt like a lifeline thrown to him in a storm. "Dear Liam Green, we are pleased to inform you that we've reviewed your application and would like to invite you for an interview at our store. We were impressed by your passion for sports and believe you could be a great fit for our team. Please come by on Wednesday at 2 p.m. to meet with our manager, Mr. Harris. We look forward to meeting you. Sincerely, the sports shop team." Liam's hands trembled as he read the email over and over again. He couldn't believe it. It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't another silence. It was a real, tangible opportunity. His pulse raced as excitement mixed with a wave of relief. He had been waiting for this moment, hoping for a sign. and now it was here. For a few moments, he simply sat there, staring at the screen. It was as though the weight he had been carrying for the past few months was lifting, piece by piece. The promise of an interview felt like a breath of fresh air in a world that had been suffocating him. It wasn't a guarantee, of course. It wasn't a job offer. But it was a chance. A real chance. And that was more than he had hoped for in a long time. Liam quickly set a reminder on his phone for the interview. He then reread the email several times, making sure he hadn't missed any details. He was determined to make a good impression. The thought of walking into that store and sitting across from the manager filled him with both excitement and nervousness. But this was his shot, and he wasn't going to waste it. The next few days felt like an eternity. Liam spent the time preparing for the interview, rehearsing answers in front of the mirror, and researching the store he was applying to. He learned about their history, the products they sold, and their customer base. He even looked up reviews online to get an idea of what kind of work environment they had. He wanted to show the manager that he was not just interested in the job, but that he had done his homework, that he cared about the store and what they represented. He went through his wardrobe, trying to pick out the best clothes for the interview. Everything he owned felt too casual, but he made do. He didn't have a suit, but he found a clean button-down shirt and a pair of pressed trousers that would have to do. They weren't the flashiest outfit, but they were presentable, and that was all he could afford. The night before the interview, Liam barely slept. He kept imagining every possible scenario in his head. What if the manager didn't like him? What if he froze during the interview? What if he messed up his answers? The nerves were starting to get the best of him, but he pushed them aside. He had prepared for this. This was his opportunity, and he was going to take it. Wednesday arrived, and Liam got up early, eager but anxious. He quickly showered, dressed in his best clothes, and left the apartment with his stomach in knots. As he made his way to the store, his thoughts raced. What would it be like to work there? Would he get along with the team? And what if, after all of this, he still didn't get the job? The store wasn't far from his apartment, so he arrived early. He stood outside for a moment, taking in the sight of the building. It was a modest shop, nothing too fancy, but it was neat, well organized, and the displays of sports equipment looked professional. It was the kind of place that Liam could see himself working in. He took a deep breath and walked inside, feeling the cool air hit his face. The interior was just as Liam had imagined, bright, welcoming, and full of sporting goods. The shelves were lined with everything from footballs to tennis rackets, each item neatly arranged. He walked up to the counter, where a young woman greeted him with a smile. "Hi, you must be Liam?" she asked. "Yes, that's me," he replied, feeling a little shaky. I'll let Mr. Harris know you're here. Please, take a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Liam nodded and took a seat in the waiting area, his heart still racing. The room felt too quiet, but at least he wasn't alone. Other customers were browsing the store, picking out items, trying on shoes, and asking questions. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, remembering why he was there in the first place, to be around the world he loved, even if it wasn't in the way he had once imagined. Minutes later, a man in his late 30s, wearing a neatly pressed shirt and khakis, approached Liam with a warm handshake. "Liam, I'm Mr. Harris. It's great to meet you. Let's get started, shall we?" Liam stood up, his nerves replaced with a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He was about to take the first step in a new direction, and he wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. As Mr. Harris led him to the back of the store for the interview, Liam knew that this was just the beginning. Whether or not he got the job didn't matter as much as the fact that he had finally gotten his foot in the door. He had found his chance, and he was ready to take it. Chapter 6. The Enchanting Fair. The morning of the fair dawned with the promise of a perfect summer day. The sun shone brightly, painting the sky in a brilliant blue that stretched endlessly above the city. There was a warm, pleasant breeze in the air, carrying the sweet scent of flowers from the park. For the first time in a long while, Liam woke up feeling a sense of lightness. Perhaps it was the thought of something new, something outside of his usual routine, that gave him a break from the crushing weight of his daily struggles. The fair was something to look forward to, a simple, fun distraction that he desperately needed. He had seen the flyer a few days earlier while walking to the store, a small piece of paper tacked to a community bulletin board. It promised a day of games, food, music, and entertainment. "A fair in the park," the flyer had read. "Fun for everyone. Come and enjoy the festivities." The ad had caught his eye, offering the kind of escape he hadn't allowed himself in months. It was just the right thing to do, even if he didn't have much money to spare. He could go, enjoy the sights, and forget about his worries for a while. Liam had been to the park countless times in the past, but today felt different. As he made his way there, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He wasn't sure what he expected from the day, but he hoped that at the very least, it would offer a brief reprieve from his constant search for employment and the weight of financial pressure that loomed over him. As he approached the park, he could see the colorful tents and booths being set up. The vibrant colors of red, yellow, and blue created an inviting scene, filling the park with an energy that seemed contagious. The laughter and chatter of people preparing for the event added to the lively atmosphere. There were families with young children running around, eager to enjoy the day, and groups of friends excitedly discussing what games they would try first. Liam couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so many positive emotions at once. The air was thick with excitement, and it was hard not to get caught up in it. After buying his ticket at the entrance, Liam stepped into the fairgrounds. The sound of lively music playing from speakers added to the festive atmosphere, and there were vendors selling everything from cotton candy to hot dogs. Everywhere he looked, there were booths with games, ring toss, dartboards, and even a small carnival ride for kids. He could hear the excited shouts of winners and the playful teasing of those trying to win the prizes. Liam walked slowly through the fair, taking in the scene. For the first time in months, he felt the tension in his shoulders loosen. He wasn't thinking about his job search, the bills piling up, or the uncertain future ahead of him. It was like the world had momentarily shifted into a space where none of that mattered. All that mattered in that moment was the simple joy of being there. He decided to start with one of the games. He wasn't sure if he would win anything, but it was all about fun, right? He walked up to a booth where a man was handing out darts for a dart-throwing competition. The prize was a large teddy bear, its soft fur glistening in the sunlight. It was probably meant for a child, but it didn't matter to Liam. It had been a long time since he'd allowed himself to just have fun. He picked up the darts, took a deep breath, and threw the first one. It missed. His aim was off. He tried, again, this time a little more focused. The second dart hit the target, but it wasn't a bullseye. He could tell the man at the booth was getting ready to move on to the next customer, but Liam wasn't ready to give up. He took a moment, breathed deeply, and thought about all the games he'd played as a kid, how he had never given up until he succeeded. With a new sense of determination, he picked up the final dart. This time, he aimed carefully, focusing on the center of the board. He threw it, and this time, it landed exactly where he wanted. The crowd cheered, and Liam's face broke into a grin as the booth attendant handed him the prize. "Congratulations," the man said. "Looks like you're our winner today." Liam laughed, holding the oversized teddy bear in his arms like a trophy. It was a small win, but to him it felt significant. It wasn't about the bear. It was about the feeling of accomplishment. It had been so long since he had allowed himself to feel proud of anything. And this simple win, at a carnival game, reminded him that small victories could be just as meaningful as the big ones. With his prize in hand, Liam continued to wander through the fair. He stopped by a food stall and treated himself to an ice cream cone, savoring the cold sweetness as it melted in the heat of the day. He felt a warmth in his chest that wasn't just from the sun. It was the warmth of letting go, of allowing himself to be present in the moment, of not thinking about what was next or what had come before. After finishing his ice cream, Liam took a moment to sit on one of the park benches. He looked around at the people laughing and playing, some enjoying the rides, others trying their luck at the games. There was something so simple and pure about the day, something he had forgotten in the whirlwind of his job search and his search for purpose. For the first time in a while, he felt like he was a part of something, like he wasn't alone in his struggles. As the afternoon wore on, Liam's thoughts began to shift. He wasn't just enjoying the fair for the sake of distraction. The experience was reminding him of something important. It was reminding him that life wasn't just about the serious moments or the big achievements. It was also about finding joy in the little things, in moments like this one. Moments of laughter, simple fun, and unexpected surprises. He walked through the fairgrounds again, feeling more at ease with himself. The games, the food, the laughter, and the music, everything about the fair had brought him a sense of peace. But little did he know, it wasn't just the fun of the fair that would leave a lasting impression on him. As he passed a small tent, near the far corner of the park, a large sign caught his eye. It read, "Madam Luna, discover your future." The tent was adorned with colorful fabrics, and a small table was set up at the entrance with a sign asking people to come in for a reading. There was something mysterious and intriguing about the sign, something that piqued his curiosity. Without thinking much about it, Liam walked toward the tent. The idea of learning about his future felt like a fun, silly distraction. It wasn't something he usually believed in, but he figured it couldn't hurt. He stepped inside, the light from outside casting a warm glow over the dark interior, and that's when he saw her. An older woman with silver hair and deep-set eyes sat at a small table, surrounded by flickering candles and cards. She looked up at him with a kind smile, as if she had been expecting him. "Welcome, young man," she said with a soft, welcoming voice. "Are you ready to discover your future?" Liam hesitated, but then, on a whim, he nodded. Why not? He thought. It can't hurt. As he sat down, he couldn't have known just how much that simple decision would alter the course of his life. Chapter 7. The Mysterious Fortune Teller. Liam stood in front of the tent, the sign above it reading, "Madame Luna, discover your future." The colorful fabrics flapping gently in the breeze seemed to beckon him inside, and for some inexplicable reason, a sense of curiosity began to stir in him. He wasn't one to believe in fortune tellers, much less the idea that anyone could predict the future. But something about the setup intrigued him. The soft glow from inside the tent, the flickering, candles that seemed to cast shadows across the fabric walls, and the sense of mystery that hung in the air. Maybe it was the excitement of the fair that had put him in such an open, adventurous mood. Or maybe it was just the way the world seemed to shift when he allowed himself to embrace the unknown. He stood there for a moment longer, watching the people outside pass by, laughing and chatting with friends, while others wandered off to enjoy the games. But for some reason, Liam couldn't take his eyes off the tent. A part of him wanted to laugh at the idea of what lay inside, but another part of him, one that he couldn't quite explain, felt compelled to step forward. With a final deep breath, he decided to go for it. Why not? He whispered to himself. A little fun, a little distraction. What harm could it do? He pushed aside the curtain at the entrance and stepped into the dim interior. The air inside was thick with the scent of incense, and the soft flicker of candles bathed the room in an otherworldly glow. The atmosphere felt both calming and strange, as though time itself had slowed down. There were tables covered with velvet, cloths, their surfaces adorned with an array of crystals, tarot cards, and small trinkets. Everything seemed carefully arranged to evoke a sense of mysticism, as if the very space was built to transport someone into another world. And then, there she was. Seated behind a small wooden table in the center of the room, an elderly woman with silver-gray hair and a kind, knowing smile looked up at him. Her eyes sparkled as she regarded him with an air of quiet wisdom. She was dressed in layers of flowing clothing, the rich fabrics in hues of purple, gold, and crimson that matched the decor of the tent. Her hands, adorned with several ornate rings, were gently folded in front of her. There was something calming yet unnerving about her presence, as if she already knew everything about him, even before he had spoken a word. "Welcome, young man," she said softly, her voice soothing and melodic. "I knew you would come." Liam blinked, surprised by how comfortable the words made him feel. There was no judgment in her gaze, no expectation. She simply observed him with a peaceful certainty, like a gentle guide waiting for him to make the next move. He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. He had no real reason to be there after all. He wasn't seeking answers. But something in her voice, in the way she spoke, urged him to stay. I'm not sure if I believe in all of this," Liam said, looking around the tent. He gestured, vaguely to the tarot cards, crystals, and incense. "I mean, the future? It feels kind of, I don't know, made up." The woman smiled again, her eyes twinkling with amusement, as though she had heard similar words 1,000 times before. "Ah, skepticism is natural. Most people think they can control their own fate, young one. But sometimes the path ahead is more than we can see with our own eyes." Liam nodded, still unsure of what to make of the situation. He had only come for the fun of it, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how odd it was to sit in a fortune-teller's tent in the middle of a fairground. But there was something oddly comforting about the woman's presence. Her calmness, her serene demeanor, made him feel like it was okay to ask questions he hadn't dared ask himself. Are you here to hear your future? Madame Luna asked, her voice gentle, drawing him back into the moment. I guess, Liam replied, unsure of what exactly he was getting himself into. I'm just not sure if there's anything to this whole fortune thing. Madame Luna's smile deepened, and she beckoned him closer. The future isn't always a matter of magic or fate, young man. Sometimes it's about understanding the signs that are already before us. She paused for a moment, then gestured to a small deck of tarot cards resting on the table in front of her. Shall we begin? It will help us see what lies ahead. Liam, still unsure of what to expect, nodded. He wasn't sure if it was her calming presence or the curiosity inside him, but for some reason, he found himself agreeing. All right, let's give it a try. Madame Luna shuffled the cards with practiced ease, the movement fluid and deliberate. As she shuffled, she spoke softly, almost as though she were speaking to herself. The cards will reveal what your heart already knows. You may not be able to see it clearly yet, but the answers are within you. Trust yourself. She placed the deck of cards face down between them and looked up at him. Now, take 3 cards and place them on the table. These will give us insight into your past, your present, and your future. Liam hesitated for a moment, wondering how much of this was just a show. But he did as she asked, picking up the cards one by one and placing them in front of her. Each card felt oddly heavy in his hand, like it carried some kind of secret or weight. He didn't know if it was all just theatrics, but a part of him couldn't help but wonder what would happen if he did believe. Madame Luna closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking in the energy of the cards. The air in the tent seemed to change, quieter, more still, as if the world outside had faded away. She picked up the first card and looked at it intently, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though reading something only she could see. The past, she said, her voice low and deliberate. This card shows a time of great ambition and promise. You've had dreams, big dreams, but they've been shadowed by the weight of disappointment and loss. There was a time when you believed everything was possible, but now you carry the burden of what might have been. Liam's chest tightened. She was right. His dreams of being a footballer, the future he had envisioned, seemed like they were nothing more than a memory. Now, a part of his past that he couldn't escape. But hearing her say it aloud brought the reality of it all crashing down once again. Madame Luna gently turned over the second card, and her eyes softened as she studied it. The present, she said. You are at a crossroads, but you already know this. You are uncertain, lost in your search for something more. You're searching for a way forward, but you can't see the path clearly. It is a time of questioning, of not knowing where to go next. Liam couldn't help but feel that the card mirrored his life perfectly. He had been stuck in that limbo for months now, waiting for something to change, unsure what direction he was even meant to take. The fortune teller turned to the final card and paused. Her expression shifted slightly, and a strange silence filled the air. "The future," she said in a voice that held both gravity and a hint of warning. She looked up at Liam, her eyes locking with his. "Do not go anywhere next Friday. If you do, you will never arrive. Something will stop you from reaching your destination. Beware, do not make the journey." Liam stared at her, startled. He hadn't expected anything like this. The fortune teller's warning sent a chill down his spine, a sense of unease creeping over him. What did it mean? What journey? What could possibly stop him from reaching his destination? Madame Luna's gaze remained steady, unwavering. "Remember, young man," she said softly, "the future is not always what we expect, but sometimes it is best to listen to the warnings before it's too late." Liam swallowed hard, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if he should laugh or take her seriously, but something about her voice, about the intensity in her eyes, made him pause. He felt as though the weight of her words was pressing down on him, urging him to pay attention. As he left the tent, the warm summer air felt different. It was as though the world had changed, shifted somehow. The fair around him was still full of life and laughter, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Was it just a coincidence? Was Madame Luna's warning just a ploy for attention? Or was it something more? Liam wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. He couldn't stop thinking about her words. And somehow, deep down, he felt like they were only the beginning of a story that was far from over. Chapter 8. The Warning. Liam stepped out of the fortune teller's tent, his mind swirling with thoughts and questions. The sounds of the fair still echoed around him. Laughter, music, the cheerful cries of children running past. But they felt distant, as though muffled by a fog that had suddenly descended over his mind. He stood still for a moment, trying to gather himself. Madame Luna's words echoed in his ears like a haunting melody. "Do not go anywhere next Friday. If you do, you will never arrive. Something will stop you from reaching your destination. Beware." It didn't make sense. How could something so vague hold so much weight? It could have been just part of her act, something to make her clients feel as if they were special. People who came to fortune tellers often wanted to believe that their lives held meaning, that their futures were already written in the cards. But Liam wasn't one of those people. Or so he thought. He wasn't the type to believe in superstitions or in mystical warnings, no matter how convincing the messenger. Yet there was something in Madame Luna's voice, in the way she had looked at him, that made him pause. There was no denying that the words had struck a chord in him. Her certainty, the way she had delivered the message, felt too real to be a mere coincidence. As he walked through the fairgrounds, his hands clenched into fists, not from anger, but from unease. Could this just be his mind playing tricks on him? Or was there something more to it? Something he couldn't yet understand? For the rest of the afternoon, Liam tried to push the warning out of his head. He wandered from one end of the fair to the other, but the fun and distraction he had once felt now seemed distant, unable to lift the weight that had settled on his chest. The bear he'd won earlier, the small token of victory, felt heavy now, its smile mocked by the confusion in his heart. How could he move past this? How could he ignore the message, especially when it had left such a strong impression on him? By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow across the park, Liam decided to leave. His mind was too full, and he knew he needed to get some distance from the fairgrounds to clear his thoughts. He walked back to his apartment, each step heavier than the last. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and his thoughts kept returning to one simple question. What did Madame Luna's warning mean? The next few days passed in a blur. Liam tried to focus on the practical things, his job search, getting ready for the interview at the sports shop. He reminded himself that he had things to do, that he couldn't waste his energy worrying about things that were out of his control. But try as he might, the warning stuck with him. It haunted his thoughts, whispering to him late at night when he lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to find peace. He had tried to forget about it, but every time he thought about next Friday, his stomach churned. It was as though something was pulling at him, warning him to be cautious, to stay home, to avoid whatever it was that might lie ahead. But what could possibly happen? What journey was she talking about? It was all so vague, so cryptic. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Madame Luna's words were somehow tied to the job opportunity he had coming up. He had to take a train to another town for the interview, which would take place the following Friday. Was this what she meant? Was this the journey she was warning him about? But why? Why would something stop him from reaching his destination? He considered the idea, weighing it carefully. He wasn't one to believe in fate or signs or anything that felt beyond his control. But the more he thought about it, the more his gut told him to take the warning seriously. He had already come so close to losing everything, his job prospects, his future. Could it be that something or someone was trying to protect him from making a mistake? Liam didn't want to admit it, but the possibility gnawed at him. There were times when he could feel the weight of decisions pressing down on him. Moments when he felt like he was teetering on the edge, unsure whether he was making the right choices. He had been on the verge of losing everything before. Was He about to make another mistake? Friday came faster than Liam had anticipated. The morning felt like any other. He woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and went through the motions of getting ready for his train journey. He packed his bag, checked his papers, and reviewed the details of the job interview once more. The sports store seemed like the perfect fit for him. The chance to work in a place surrounded by sports equipment, to get back into a world he understood and loved, filled him with anticipation. This was it. This could be the opportunity he had been waiting for. But as the time approached, to leave for the station, the warning returned to him like an uninvited guest. His chest tightened. What if it wasn't a coincidence? What if something truly was going to happen on that journey? It was silly, he told himself. Just a superstition. Just a fortune teller's words. He couldn't allow himself to be controlled by something so illogical. Still, he couldn't ignore the deep, gnawing feeling in his stomach. It was as though the universe was trying to tell him something he couldn't yet understand. Liam felt like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to take the leap or retreat. In a moment of indecision, he paced around his apartment, glancing at his watch. His train was scheduled to leave in less than an hour. If he didn't go, he could miss the interview. He could lose the chance to take a step toward rebuilding his future. But if he did go, what if something happened? What if the warning was real? Liam looked at the door, the decision hanging in the balance. He could hear the distant rumble of the train station, the buzz of the world moving forward without him. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him, something he couldn't predict. He stood still for a moment longer, his hand resting on the doorknob, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. In the end, he wasn't sure what compelled him to do it, but something inside him whispered that it wasn't just about the interview, it was about the decision he was about to make. With a deep breath, Liam turned and walked away from the door, making the choice not to go to the train station that day. It wasn't an easy decision. It was a choice that felt strange, almost foolish. But as he stood there, heart racing, something inside him told him that he had made the right call. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time in a while, Liam felt like he was listening to the quiet voice inside of him, something he had ignored for far too long. Chapter 9. The Job Offer. Liam woke up the next day with a heavy heart and a lingering sense of doubt. He had made the decision not to go on the train journey, a decision that still seemed strange even as the morning unfolded. The whole experience, from Madame Luna's warning to his last-minute choice to stay home, felt like a turning point, a moment of strange clarity, but also one filled with confusion and uncertainty. He had taken a step into the unknown, but that left him wondering whether it had been the right one. For the first time in weeks, Liam found himself with no plan. He had skipped the train ride, skipped the interview, and now he was faced with an entire day of waiting, unsure of what to do next. His thoughts raced with what-ifs. What if he had gone on the train? What if he had missed the opportunity of a lifetime? He couldn't shake the feeling that by staying behind he had somehow sabotaged his own future. Still, the decision had been made, and there was no going back now. He spent the morning pacing around his small apartment. He avoided checking his phone for any emails or calls, afraid that if he looked, he would see a missed opportunity staring back at him. His fingers hovered over his phone a few times, but he couldn't bring himself to open it. What would he say? What if the job offer was gone? What if the sports store had already found someone else to fill the position? Liam tried to focus on other things. He picked up the newspaper, hoping to distract himself with something simple, but his mind wasn't in it. His eyes glazed over. The words and the pages felt like they were flipping in slow motion, each one dragging him deeper into a sense of defeat. Nothing in the paper seemed important anymore. His eyes kept drifting to the clock, and each passing minute made him feel more anxious. It was around noon when his phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against the wood. For a second, Liam froze, unsure whether to look. Could it be the sports shop? Could they be calling to cancel the interview because he had made the wrong choice? His hands were trembling slightly as he reached for the phone, his heart racing. The notification on his screen read, "New message, sports shop interview." He hesitated for a moment, feeling his throat tighten, but then, with a deep breath, he opened the message. His eyes scanned the words quickly. "Dear Liam, thank you for your patience. We have reviewed your application and would like to offer you the position at our sports shop. We were very impressed with your passion for sports and your enthusiasm during the interview. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to confirm your acceptance. Sincerely, the sports shop team." Liam blinked, his heart skipping a beat. He read the message again to make sure he hadn't misread it. He had gotten the job. They were offering him the position. The email was clear. He had been selected. The excitement hit him like a wave, washing away all of his uncertainty. He had done it. After months of struggle, after all the rejections and doubts, here it was, the opportunity he had been waiting for. For a moment, he just sat there, holding his phone in his hands, letting the words sink in. It felt surreal. He had thought the train ride, the interview, the whole process was slipping away. But somehow, despite everything, he had managed to secure the job. The thought of finally being able to work in a place that felt meaningful to him, a place that brought him back to the world of sports he loved, filled him with a surge of joy. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to rebuild, to start fresh, and to regain some sense of stability in his life. Liam's fingers shook as he typed his response. He had to confirm it, had to make sure they knew he was ready, eager even, to start. The words felt like they came from somewhere deep inside him, from a place of relief and excitement he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Dear Sports Shop team, thank you so much for offering me the position. I am thrilled to accept the job and look forward to joining your team. I am passionate about sports and am eager to contribute to the success of the store. Please let me know the next steps and when I can begin. Sincerely, Liam Green. Liam hit send and leaned back in his chair, the weight on his chest slowly lifting. It was a simple response, but it meant everything. It was his first step toward a new chapter in his life, a step that he had been too afraid to take only hours before. The job offer wasn't just a piece of good news. It was validation. It was proof that he was moving forward, that the hard work and the doubts had led him to this moment. As the minutes passed, Liam felt a mixture of excitement and relief. He stood up and walked over to the small window in his apartment, looking out over the city. The streets were bustling with people, with cars driving past, and life was moving forward at a pace that felt out of his control. But now, for the first time in a long time, it didn't seem so overwhelming. He was part of the movement again, part of the world that was rushing forward with opportunities, with progress, with hope. He knew the job wouldn't solve everything. It wouldn't fix all the issues he had with his past, nor would it erase the struggles that lay ahead. But it was a start. It was a chance to move forward. He had taken that leap, and now the future seemed a little brighter. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and plans. He talked with the manager at the sports shop about the next steps, confirming his start date and discussing what to expect on his first day. It was all moving so fast, but it felt right. The anxiety that had gripped him just the day before was now replaced by a sense of calm anticipation. He could finally begin again. Later that evening, Liam sat at his kitchen table, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. It had been difficult, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and confusion. But somehow, through it all, he had made it. He had found a way forward. Tomorrow, he would wake up and start his first day at the sports shop. He would begin a new chapter, and this time, he felt ready. The job offer was more than just a piece of paper. It was a promise that the future was still wide open, filled with possibilities, and Liam was ready to take them. Chapter 10. A Twist of Fate. Liam woke up early on his first day at the sports shop, his heart beating with anticipation. For the first time in what felt like ages, he felt a sense of excitement about the day ahead. It was strange, really, to Think that a few days ago, he had been unsure about everything, filled with doubt, waiting for opportunities to fall into his lap. And now, here he was, about to start a job he had worked so hard to get, in a field he loved. The feeling of starting fresh was both overwhelming and thrilling. He quickly got ready, his fingers moving with an energy he hadn't felt in a long time. He put on his new shirt, the one he had picked out specifically for his first day, and made sure his shoes were polished. He checked his appearance in the mirror and gave himself a small nod. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. It wasn't just about the job. It was about his belief in himself, his ability to push through the challenges and to reach this point. As he left his apartment, the morning air was crisp and the world seemed to welcome him. There was a gentle hum of life in the city, the distant rumble of traffic, the chatter of people walking down the street, and the bustle of the marketplace that always felt like a backdrop to his daily routine. He made his way to the bus stop, eager to get to the sports shop and begin his new chapter. The sun was rising, casting golden hues over the city, and it seemed like everything was falling into place. The journey to the shop felt different this morning. He no longer felt like he was just going through the motions. He felt like he was moving with purpose. His heart was light, his mind focused, and he allowed himself to enjoy the walk. The shops and the cafes, the pedestrians and cyclists, all of it seemed to reflect the energy he had inside. It was a new beginning, and Liam felt ready. As he approached the shop, his excitement grew. It was a small storefront, nothing too extravagant, but it was clean and welcoming. The large glass windows displayed various sports gear, football jerseys, tennis rackets, and rows of shoes lined up neatly. The store was busy already, with a few customers inside, browsing the aisles. Liam took a deep breath before walking through the door, a sense of confidence washing over him. This was it. Inside, the atmosphere was vibrant, with the sound of soft music playing in the background, the occasional beep of the register, and the quiet murmur of customers discussing their needs with the staff. It was all a little overwhelming, but in a good way. It was the kind of environment where he could thrive, surrounded by things he loved, by people who appreciated the importance of sports. It felt like home, even though he had only just walked in. He was greeted by his manager, a friendly middle-aged man named Rob, who shook his hand and smiled warmly. Rob seemed genuinely excited to have him on board. "Liam, welcome to the team," he said with a hearty handshake. "I'm glad you're here. We've got a lot of work to do, but we'll take it one step at a time." Liam felt his nerves settle as Rob showed him around the store, introducing him to the rest of the staff. Everyone was kind, eager to help him get started. There was Emma, the young woman at the register, who had been working there for a few months, Carl, an older guy who managed the stockroom, and Sarah, a fitness enthusiast who worked in customer service. It felt like a good team. Everyone seemed friendly, willing to help, and happy to be there. It wasn't just a job for them. It was a passion, something they cared deeply about. As the day went on, Liam found himself settling into the rhythm of the store. He worked alongside Carl, organizing inventory and stocking the shelves. Every year, now and then, customers would come up to him for advice on the best tennis racket or which pair of football boots they should buy. It was exciting to be able to help people, to talk about the things he knew so well. The conversations flowed easily, and he found that he was enjoying himself more than he had anticipated. By the time the lunch break arrived, Liam felt a sense of accomplishment. He was learning quickly, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The doubts that had clouded his mind just a few days ago seemed like a distant memory. For the first time, he could see the path ahead clearly. But then, as the afternoon wore on, something unexpected happened. Liam was in the back, helping Carl with some boxes when the bell over the door chimed. He looked up, expecting it to be another customer. But when he saw the man walking through the door, a sudden wave of recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. It was the old man, the one he had met on the train that day. The same man he had helped get off the train after it had stopped due to the fallen tree. The man who had seemed so quiet, so reserved, yet kind. The man who had shared his tea, with Liam offering him an unspoken bond during that strange train ride. Liam's heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Was this a coincidence? It seemed so strange, so out of place. The old man was standing just inside the door, glancing at the sports equipment, his hands folded behind his back. He looked exactly as he had on the train, gentle, with a weathered face and a cane resting by his side. Liam froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. He didn't want to make a scene, but the recognition was undeniable. He couldn't just ignore the man. The memories of that day, the conversation they had, the way the old man had spoken to him with such quiet wisdom, flashed through his mind. After a moment of hesitation, Liam decided to approach him. He walked over to the old man, his footsteps, light but filled with an unexplainable urgency. The man turned, his face breaking into a small smile when he saw Liam. "Ah, you," the old man said, his voice familiar and warm. "I remember you. We met on the train, didn't we?" Liam smiled, a little surprised by the recognition. "Yes, I remember you too. It's good to see you again." "I didn't expect to run into you here," the old man said, his eyes twinkling. "I see you found your way into something new, a job that suits you, I think." Liam felt a surge of surprise and a little confusion. How could the old man know about his new job? He hadn't mentioned anything to anyone. But before he could ask, the man continued, "I own this store," he said simply, "and I'm here to make sure you get the opportunity you deserve." Liam blinked, taken aback. "You own this store?" The man nodded. "I do, and I've been watching you. You've got a good heart, and you know sports. I'm not the type to let good opportunities pass by." Liam's mind was racing. This was no coincidence. It was the same old man he had helped on the train, the one who had shared his sandwich, the one who had laughed and offered him advice without even realizing it. And now, somehow, the universe had brought him back into Liam's life. In the most unexpected way. "I've been looking for someone like you," the man continued. "And I think you're the right person for the job. You've proven yourself with kindness and hard work. I can see that you're capable." Liam couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was almost too surreal. Here he was, standing in front of the person who owned the very store he had started working for, and the man was offering him something more. The realization slowly sank in. The path that had seemed uncertain just days ago was now opening up with opportunities. The old man smiled once more. "I trust that you'll make the right choice. The future is yours, Liam. Don't let it slip away." Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.